share my screen. Can everyone look at this screen? So Aksharji, the screen is visible, right?
I can see it.
Sure. So my book is called Bharat's Military Conquests in Foreign Lands. It is available both in Amazon India and Subbu Publications. So it's published by Subbu Publications. And this deals with Indian military operations and expeditions, across the globe between 900 BC and 1680 CE. Now, why this book? And what is the importance or what is the significance of the theme of this book? Now, for decades, right, we have been taught this in our history textbooks, or you ask any historian or any academic, in our universities. There are three great assumptions which underlie our Indian history. Number one, that India was always invaded. So we always had invaders coming, but our kings never conducted military operations or conquests outside the boundaries of Bharatvarsha. So when I say Bharatvarsha, I am including the whole of present-day South Asia, inclusive of Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Maldives. So outside this area, there was no military operation or military offensive carried out by Indian rulers. There are the Cholas, obviously, but other than that, we don't have any information or any research on this. Secondly, we are a land of ahimsa. So we always were a defensive culture. We always spread our culture and sciences peacefully without a political push. Now, it's a fact that ahimsa is one of the, I would say, defining values of our civilization. But our civilization also had a Kshatriya dharma or a martial tradition. And it is from this martial tradition that my book sought to demolish this myth that there were no military conquests or operations or expeditions conducted by our Indian rulers in foreign shores. So as per my book, there are no less than 21 recorded Indian military operations in the past, in the 3000 years between 900 BC and 1680 CE. Now, why only 21? There may be many more. But this is based on my research and constraints which I faced as an individual researcher. There were 21. These 21 expeditions were conducted by 14 Indian dynasties. Importantly, these conquests were not undertaken to subjugate any foreign race, to stamp a religious supremacy, or to stamp a national supremacy. They were not undertaken for any of these reasons. They were not even undertaken to exploit or extract some resources or minerals from abroad. So the question really lies is, what was the objective of these different conquests and operations, right? To establish this, what I have done is I have looked at not just Sanskrit, Prakrit, and other Indian language inscriptions and texts. I have also matched it with no less than 70 texts and inscriptions from 16 different languages across the world: Arabic, Chinese, Pahlavi, Tocharian, Tibetan, etc. What I will do is, since I don't want this to be a monologue, I will very quickly go through each of these 21 expeditions, maybe spend just about a minute in each expedition, and just summarize the main conclusion and objectives. Then when I conclude, maybe if somebody has any queries on any particular expedition, we could pick that up in greater detail and go to the sources, the different, the different geographical features, the military equipment, etc. Right? So I think that's the way I will kind of go through my presentation. So I start from the west first. I'll then go to the east, then the north, and then the south. So starting from the west, there was an Arabic theologian, leading Arabic theologian called Muhammad bin Zarir al-Tabari, who lived in the 9th century Baghdad. Okay, he was also greatly interested in early Arabic history. Now, in the volume 2 of his Tariq, Wa Rasul al-Muluk, he writes that there are extant traditions in the Mediterranean Sea, okay, in the Tabrash region, by 3 tribes at least, that around 900 BCE, as per his dating, there was a mighty Indian world conqueror. He calls him as Zaraj. Zaraj in Arabic, Semitic Zara, in Sanskrit Jaya or Jara. Right? Now, as per these traditions, the Indian conqueror led 100-ship armada from the Indian western coast right up to the Persian Gulf, disembarked, the army marched up to the Mediterranean Sea and surrounded Jerusalem. Why? Very interestingly, because an ancient tribe in the Mediterranean region was persecuted for its religious beliefs. Okay. Now, this tribe appealed to help from this Zaraj. So, to protect this ancient culture from extinction, this military intervention was undertaken. Number two, Chandragupta Vikramaditya of the Gupta Empire launched a preemptive strike. So, when we say preemptive strike, there was a mighty Persian empire called the Sasanian Empire, the Golden Empire of Persia. They formed an alliance with the White Huns or the Hephthalites, who in turn formed an alliance with the Tocharians, or people in the Tajik Pamis. Now, this alliance was going to invade India. So, to counteract that, to preempt that, Chandragupta Vikramaditya launched a counter-offensive into Persia, and after Persia, going through the Kapis or the Parvan region, right up till the Oxus Valley, southern Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then to the Tarim Beach. So, a preemptive invasion, a preemptive counteroffensive. Number three, 1,400 years ago, we find no less than 4 Arabic letters and 1 Pahlavi record, which talk about the Chalukya ruler, Chalukya Pulakeshi II, or Satyashriya Pulakeshi Parameshwara, who launched a naval detachment or naval expedition from the Konkan coast to Al-Faw Peninsula in Iraq. And based on his expedition, was so effective that the Rashidun Caliphate, which was the first caliphate of Islamic history, had to retreat 80 kilometers from the Al-Faw Peninsula and establish a garrison, which later on came to be called the famous city of Basra. So, why was this done? This was done to protect the Indian merchant diaspora who had settled down the Al-Faw Peninsula. So, they were under attack. So, to protect them, Chalukya Pulakeshi II launched a naval expedition, and actually temporarily occupied that Al-Faw Peninsula. Expedition 4, there is a Sanskrit inscription called Gopadri Prashasti. Now, this is backed by one Omani and one Iraqi account, basically a CR and a Tufail. As per this, the Pratiharas launched naval guerrilla strikes on multiple ports in the Persian Gulf. Zulfar and Dibba in modern day UAE, Basra in Iraq, Fars, that is about ports in Iran. And this was done to cut the supply lines or the sea lanes of communication between the Abbasid Caliphate and the Arab invading forces in Sindh. So the Arab invading forces had reached up to Sindh. To cut their supply lines and sea lanes of communication, this expedition was launched. Expedition 5, there was a great Rajput ruler of Mewar called Bappa Rawal. So Bappa Rawal launched a counter-offensive against an Arab invasion by conquering up till Khurasan on the shores of the Caspian Sea. Expedition 6, I'm sorry, this is a very interesting expedition. In 1663, a naval fleet from Jaitapur in Maharashtra, protected by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, sailed right up till Mocha in Yemen. This was done to break the Karta system of the Europeans. So, to challenge European and Arabic supremacy of the Western Indian Ocean, this was a freedom of navigation naval fleet. So, this naval fleet went without asking the permission or the Kartas of anyone under the Indian flag to establish India's zone of influence. So, very interesting expedition. Now, from the west, I'll go to the east. In the east, I'll cover Yunnan and Han China. So the geographically, China today is bigger than what it was in the ancient past. So areas such as Yunnan, Tibet, East Turkestan, Manchuria, these were independent civilizations on their own regard. So I have considered them separately in my book. Now, first I'll cover Yunnan. So as per at least two Chinese accounts, one from the Ming era and another from the Yuan era, three armies of the Mauryas launched an expedition into Yunnan, okay, and established an administration of over there centered on Dianchi. Why was this done? This was done because a great Ashwamedha Yagna type of ritual, or in fact, Ashwamedha Yagna itself was launched in the mid of Ashoka's reign. And as per the ancient Indian Chakravarti traditions, a Digvijaya had to conquer unsettled lands like the ancient Prithu and settle these for cultivation, urbanization, agriculture, etc. So Yunnan at that point of time was in the midst of a semi-nomadic and nomadic culture, as archaeological evidence reveals, a transition into an agricultural-based society, and later on the first city centers around Dianchi. Archaeologically, as also in tradition, the non-Han Bai tradition was due to this Indian or Mauryan rule over Yunnan. I then go over to the conquest of China itself. So we have no less than a Tang record by Chang Jui and a Liang record by the Emperor Wu, which talk about Ashoka being an iron wheel monarch who politically and administratively conquered and administered areas of central China, such as Zhejiang and other areas surrounding it. Now, why was this done? This was a chaotic period in Chinese history called the warring or the period of the warring six Zhao kingdoms. Now, because the Mauryans or Indians were already there in Yunnan, they felt threatened because of this instability. So the Indian conquest was to stabilize the situation. In fact, the first unified empire of China, the Han Empire, came immediately after the end of the Indian rule or the end of the rule of Ashoka. So actually, a very important period of Chinese history which established a civilization actually was directly linked to the period of Indian. Expedition 9, very interesting expedition by Ghadawala Govindachandra. So as per a very interesting Sanskrit text, Ghadawala Govindachandra, who ruled over Kannauj or Kanyakubja in the early 12th century, conquered not just Bhauta or Tibet, but also China, mainland China. Now, there is corroborative evidence around this in different parts of the subcontinent and in East Asia. So why was this done? This was done to secure the commercial rights of the Indian merchants. So the Song Empire, which is the empire of China, gave preferential access to the Shailendras, who are from Sumatra and the Malaya region, again in preference to the Indian merchant guilds. Now, Govindachandra was an ally of the Cholas. So one of the sisters of Govindachandra actually married a Chola prince. So Govindachandra's campaigns against the Chinese was an alliance with the Cholas to secure the Indian commercial interests. Now, after the west and the east, I'll go to the north. Please excuse me, I'll just be back. So, talking about Turkestan, the whole of Central Asia. So, there was a great warrior prince called Dharma Vivardhana Kunal. He was a son of Ashoka, but he had his own spiritual quest and a spiritual journey. He was a great, I would say, worshipper. His Ichadeva was Vaishravana or Lord Kubera, right? So what Dharma Vivardhana Kunal did is, he led an army, broke through the Karakoram range. So the inaccessible Karakoram range. Today we have the Siachen Glacier there. We have the K2 mountain, the most treacherous mountain to climb, the second highest mountain. So he broke through these mountains in infrastructure which was recorded even 700 years later by a Chinese text called Fokoki. So he broke through the Karakoram mountains, went to Tash Kurgan region in the Xinjiang province of modern day China, which at that time was called East Turkestan. From Tash Kurgan to Yarkand, crossed the Taklamakan desert, went to Kuchi, which is again in the northern part of East Turkestan, then crossed over to Kazakhstan, the modern country of Kazakhstan, where there's a hill called Kuttana Hill. Kuttana from Kustana, from Kunala. Now, at this Kuttana Hill, he fought the Scythians, who are one of the northern barbarians, in the fear of which the Chinese built the Great Wall. So he defeated these the Scythians, the so-called northern barbarians, and crowned himself in the Kuttana Hill, came to the southern part of Taklamakan desert, and in Khotan, as per a Chinese text, established a Deva Pishi Mande, or a Sthapana, Devasthana Sthapana of Lord Kubera, who, as per our traditions, is the Dikpala of the north. So he established a temple of Lord Kubera and established a governorship from that age. Right? What was the reason for this? Again, linked to the Ashwamedha Yagna. This is the break. So before this, there was a Kurgan culture or a nomadic, semi-nomadic culture in East Turkestan. After this conquest, the first agriculture in the oasis of the Taklamakan desert and urbanization and the first hints of civilization, writing, medicine, all of them are found, interestingly, in Brahmi, Kharoshti, and Sanskrit. So it was the Indianization and Sanskritization of East Turkestan which established civilization there. Expedition level, Lalitaditya Muktapida, who was from our Sharad Valley or Kashmir Valley, established a mighty empire, fought the Tibetans and the Turks from Tokharistan, Tajikistan region, the southern Xinjiang region. And this was to preempt both the Tibetan aggression, at that point of time, the Tibetans were a mighty power, and also the expanding Arab influence into Central Asia. So again, a preemptive strike, similar to the strikes. Expedition 12, a very interesting expedition here. Now we all hear about Muhammad Ghaznavi. Muhammad Ghaznavi invaded India ruthlessly, destroyed, desecrated so many of our temples. Interestingly, about decades after his death, his descendants again invaded India multiple times. One great ruler called Lakshmana Deva, there were many rulers who fought them, but one of the rulers called Lakshmana Deva made a counter-offensive. He struck deep into Turkestan, or into their original homeland itself, went right up till the Vanksh, the Oxus Valley, and brought three mighty Turkish empires to the heel. This king was called Parmara Lakshmadev. Now, when he was away, his brother Naravarma Deva ruled the throne with the slippers of his brother on the throne. So something like Lord Ram and Bharat. He had no selfishness to grab the throne. And he told Parmara Deva, please go and fight the Turushkas. Fight them, fight these invaders in their own country so that they dare not invade us again. I will take care of this throne for you under your name. So Lakshmadev came back, and he was so moved by his brother's devotion that he abdicated the throne and continued his campaigns of conquest. So very interesting expedition by Parmara Lakshmadeva through Ghazni, through Herat, through Balakh, through Samarkand, made three Turkish empires bad at dust. Then we come to Tibet, the immediate northeastern part. We have Buddhagupta Vikramaditya, who in the late 5th century built or conducted a physical land survey in the Dongkha Pass region on the border area of modern day, in modern Indo-Tibetan border, presently in Sikkim, the northernmost part of Sikkim. From the Dongkha Pass, the first hints of Indian culture reached Tibet, and the first unified national dynasty of Tibet was established around the same period. So again, a conquest leading to very far-reaching cultural and civilizational consequences. Expedition 14, under very interesting personality called Senge Namgyal. Now, in the 17th century, there were three great heroes: Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Lachit Barkopan, in fact, many more, but Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Lachit Barkopan, and Senge Namgyal, all of them fought Mughal expansionism and defeated the Mughals in multiple encounters. Now, Senge Namgyal has another achievement to his credit. Not only did he fight the Mughals, he also fought and conquered Western Tibet. Why? Now, Christian missionaries had reached Western Tibet, and the Tri Dakpa Takshi, who was the king of Western Tibet, had nearly converted to, let's say, the missionary Christianity. And the missionaries established a church in Rutog, which is today a PLA Chinese base. And it was to stop this missionary conversion that Senge Namgyal launched an expedition and conquered and set up an administration in Western Tibet. I'll finally go to the southern part. That is Southeast Asia. Going to the Pacific or the islands, the Pacific Islands. So, firstly, we have multiple texts like the Bodhisattva Kalpataru, Raghyo Baspun, which actually talk of a Mauryan intervention or a naval intervention by the Mauryas in the Sunda Straits, the states between Java and Sumatra. This was to protect the Indian merchants from Austronesian seafarers who had indulged in several piracy acts against these Indian merchant convoys, which are coming from Suvarnabhumi. So they were collecting gems and gold and coming to protect them from the pirate raids which were launched in that particular area. Then during the Gupta Empire, there were a lot of strategic alliances which were formed. We have two examples of Langkyasu in Malaya and Champa in Vietnam. In Langkyasu, there was a great revolution and the Indian ally was overthrown. So the Indian naval fleet actually helped in the sense that this Indian ally in the Malaya Peninsula got refuge in India, and later on he was sent back and reinstated to the throne of that particular kingdom. So a classic example of strategic influence to maintain your power and your strategic influence in that region. So this is also a period when Indian and Sanskrit culture was at its peak all across Southeast Asia. So to maintain that particular, I would say, cultural influence and political influence, such expeditions and such, I would say, political influence was actually extended over this region. Expedition 17, around 850 CE, the Pallava king Nandivarman III launched a naval expedition to Takua Pa in Thailand, conquered Takua Pa. Now we have an inscription in Takua Pa which mentions both him by his name called Avani Narayana and also the Pallava general Nangur Udayan. A military cum civilian administration was established in Takua Pa in Thailand. Now why was this established? Because it was very close to Isthmus of Kra. Now the Malacca Straits were dominated by the Shailendras, who are from Sumatra. Now the Shailendras established a monopoly over east-west trade and imposed a lot of taxes and in fact forced the foreign merchants to disembark on several of the Shailendra ports. So the Indian merchants like Manikgiraman or Manikka Graman or Mani Gramam or Vanikka Graman, a merchant association, was troubled by this. So they appealed to help from the Indian Chakravarti that please help us and establish free access of trade. So just like today, we have the United Nations Convention, which says there should be freedom of navigation, international waters should be protected. Pallava Nandivarman established a base so that the Isthmus of Kra could be kept open as an alternative route. And there is a very clear show of strength to anybody who wanted to monopolize East-West trade. So very interesting conquest and expedition there. Expedition 18, Kadaram Kondan, Rajendra Chola's expedition and conquest all across Southeast Asia. So Kadaram or Kedah in Malaysia was the capital at that point of the Shailendras. The Shailendras not only sought to monopolize East-West trade, but they filled the ears of foreign courts like the Song Empire of China against Indian merchants. Finally, the king of the Shailendras, started proclaiming himself as a Chakravarti par excellence. Now, all this was a direct affront. The trouble faced by Indian merchants, the complete lack of access given to our the trading guilds from Bharat. So all this led to an intervention by the Cholas in no less than 14 major battles all across Southeast Asia. There was a pincer attack launched from the south via Sumatra, Tamasik, and what is called today is Malaysia, and the north via the Isthmus of Kra and going southwards, and diversionary raids in Myanmar and Vietnam. Expedition 19, which was again under Chola expedition by Veera Rajendra. Now, basically, this was a counter coup, a regime stabilization operation. An Indian ally was deposed, so to reinstate it. Now, Expedition 20, this is by under Chola emperor called Kulatunga Chola. Now, this time military bases were established. So you had Nagar Shrishti, or a civilian administrator who was also a part of merchant guild, and a Nagar Senapati, or a military garrison. We find such dual commercial military garrison in Barus, Temasek, Kedah. The garrison in Temasek was called Singapuram, modern day Singapore. So what was the objective of this? Securing our sea lanes of communication so that, again, they keep open for commerce and our economic market remains secure and viable. Finally, Expedition 21. Now, generally after the 13th century, because our own kingdoms were under attack by foreign invasions, we don't find too many evidences of foreign expeditions, but a few are there. One of them is, very widely quoted, expedition by Devaraya II of Vijayanagar Empire, who launched expeditions against the Hantawadi or the Burmese kingdom against Pegu and Tenasserim. This was secure commercial access to the Indian merchants. Now, obviously, even after this, we had expeditions such as the Pamhaiba expedition of Manipur against Burma in the 18th century, or Zorawar Singh's expedition in Tibet in the 19th century. So there were these smaller expeditions which served as a legacy. Now, just to conclude, before I open to queries and dive deeper into any particular expedition, what can we do by this expedition? What is the use of all this? What is the... So there are a lot of things we can do. Now, number one, accepting our martial tradition is very important even when we set a narrative. Indian culture and Indian ideas are spread across the world, but all hostile forces which have tried to disrupt both the civilizational spread and our economic interests, our empires had enough power to intervene and secure our civilizational and economic rights and interests. So, different ideas. Could we have overseas cultural complexes named after many of these warriors in some of these areas? For example, a place in Iraq in the Al-Faw Peninsula was called Arde-Hind, or Land of India. Can we have an Arde-Hind cultural complex? Can we have a Nandivarman cultural complex in Takwapa with a museum, a statue, showcasing our links with these areas? Can we have an ancient national war memorial, just like we had a Rashtriya Samar Smarak? So all such ideas can come across if we first accept this narrative of our, I would say, of a very unique military history and historical tradition. So thank you, and I'm open to questions now. Yes, Akshay.
Hi, my name is Pranav Deshmukh, and I think I joined at the right time. Just for FYI, I already ordered your book. It's going to India.
Thank you.
And somebody's coming from India, they're going to get it. So thank you very much, first of all, for describing our India's glorious past. But I had a question about that sometimes there seems to be something missing in our past, right? Like you were describing about Rajendra Chola, who was one of the greatest of Hindu rulers. Sure. And he went all the way to Vietnam, Java, Sumatra, and this was during the years 1017 to 10 whatever. But at the same time, I think it was 1027, Muhammad Ghori destroyed the temple of Somnath. How is it that such a big ruler, and there is no history that, I mean, I did not find something that he went and helped, or he at least chased Muhammad Ghori out of it. So how is it that such a big ruler went so far but what something happened in his backyard, he was unaware of that.
Sure.
Is there something you can share?
Yeah, sure. Very nice question. And in fact, I addressed this question in my concluding chapter of my book. So you're right. So I'll first come to the this thing and then the, I would say, argument for it. So Rajendra Chola was called a Shivapada Shikara, a great worshipper of Shiva. And in 1025, when he launched his largest expedition, was the same year when Muhammad of Ghazni desecrated Somnath, which was one of the greatest Shiva temples, right? So the question really lies is, why didn't Rajendra Chola actually go up till the northwest, fight back, etc.? Now, there are two things. We unfortunately don't know a lot about that period, but we know two things. Okay, Muhammad Ghazni strike in Somnath. If you read the very Ferishta's account or even other Turkish accounts, Farsi accounts, etc., it was a lightning raid. Once he desecrated Somnath, he actually ran away to a very difficult route from, let's say, from the deserts, etc. Now, one of the reasons for that, as per one of the sources, was because Parmara Dev, as per their accounts, was coming with an army. Okay. Now, this same Parmara Dev, no less than Parmara Bhoja, is also known to be an ally of the Cholas. Okay. But we don't know anything more. Why was this attack? Was there some connection? Was there no connection? It requires more research. But definitely, both the Parmaras and Ghadwalas remained allies of the Cholas for at least around a century. I was talking about a Ghadwal Govindachandra, right? His sister married a Chola prince. So her inscription is found in Tanjavur. Similarly, in Madhya Pradesh, near Bhojpur, you have an inscription where he says that my friends, so the Parmara king's friends were the Cholas, Andhras, etc. So he said the Mitra, Sahi Mitra in Kautalya's language. So there was a connection. So could it be that this Parmara counteroffensive which happened was because of Chola allies? Now, why didn't they stop Muhammad of Ghazni from coming? That is another question altogether. You see, at that point of time, perhaps there was a great underestimation of Ghazni's, tactics. So you look at the Solanki or the Chaulukya river, right? He positioned his troops in a certain fort. Now, Muhammad of Ghazni completely bypassed that fort and came. So obviously there were those tactical, I would say, errors which were made. And yes, so I would agree with you. There is that mystery which is there, but there's also the fact that the people who actually then fought the Ghaznavids were linked to the Cholas.
Okay, thank you. So that partially explains it, but I think we have to do some more research. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Of India Defense Department
Hello.
in this research? Is there any interest?
You asked me if there's any interest, right? I got a lot of support from the Indian Navy. So in fact, my book was launched by the Western Naval Command of the Indian Navy. So Vice Admiral Dinesh K. Tripathi, commanding officer of the Western Naval Command, actually launched my book. Vice Admiral A.R. Karve has written the foreword to my book. And Commodore Ashish Khanna, Director of Maritime Heritage, Maritime History Society, which is an academic initiative of the Indian Navy, they have also, extended a lot of support to them. So yes, I mean, one part of the defense establishment has shown interest.
Second question is how it can help now to advance India's interests abroad. It's the story.
Sure. So I'll tell you one thing. One thing is we need to integrate this history with our strategic initiatives. So I gave an example of, let's say, Takua Pa in Thailand, right? In this place, you actually find a lot of remains of, let's say, our inscriptions, artifacts, our temples, etc. So why can we not have something like a cultural complex named after Nandivarman, but showcasing things like our trading links, our cultural links, etc. See, it is very important to subtly, in these countries, put forward this narrative that India had a strategic stake and a historical link with these countries. And in modern times especially, right? So if you show both our cultural aspect, but also the fact that we were guardians of a certain world order, I think that would be, I would say, a very interesting way of putting this forward. But yes, I mean that requires a lot of thought and effort. I'll give you an example of a Chinese, right? The Chinese have renamed their One Belt One Road project called Maritime Silk Road. And in fact, if you look at it, wherever they promote it, they also talk about their sailors, Zheng etc., which is very uncorroborated. You know, you don't, a lot of what they speak about has no very little evidence, but they push for that. They push that narrative. So maybe we need to also do something like that.
The other thing is, have you gone to any of these countries, verified some of the things which you are talking in your book, or anybody else?
Yeah, not all, but some of the countries I have visited. So I earlier was also a consultant. So I have been to Muscat, I have been to UAE. So I have visited some of them, definitely.
And I have a suggestion that you should share your presentation with the government of India, and
Sure.
to be shown in the parliament, should be put in a kiosk or something where people can see it. Also other museums around the country, so that people can be aware of this past history and achievements of our ancestors. So
Sure. Thank you. In fact, I should say that many ministries of the government have taken interest in this. In fact, I just had a very nice discussion with the Ministry of Culture just this week. So
okay.
yes, so definitely things are moving. Things are moving. But thanks a lot for this.
Thank you. Yeah, because that's what it should be, spread around and available to people to easily see. And also think maybe you can donate books to all these institutions or of the government where people go, all the museums around the country and the main places. And maybe in the new parliament building, we should have something on this. Okay.
Sure, sir. Definitely. Thank you. Thanks for your views on this.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Mohan Jain. I'm talking from Chicago. I'm hearing your talk. And thank you very much for doing the research. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishji. Thanks.
We have one question from the meeting chat. What triggered you to look at this aspect of our history, and have you done any other work in past and plan? What are your future books as well? And question is asked by Uma from Guyana.
Sure. So this is my third book. My first book was called First Republic, which is actually about all India Republican and democratic form of government formed as part of the Maratha Empire in the late 18th century. So it gives you an example of a true Indic, what we can call as a representative form of government based on our ethos from our Itihasa, etc. So that was the first book called the First Republic. Second book was called Age of Pie and Prose. So that is a book which is a story of three sterling Indian personalities: Aryabhat, the great scientist, our ancient scientist; Subandhu, who was a great literary writer, a prose writer in Sanskrit; and Buddhagupta Vikramaditya, a mighty emperor. So how all these three individuals met and they changed not just Bharat but also the world. So how sciences, how literature, how they spread across the world from East Asia, West Asia, Europe, etc. So that's my second book called Age of Pie and Prose. This is my third. I'm sorry. The first question was what motivated me to write this book, right? So if you look at it, right, I mean, if you look at the way we taught history in our schools or our universities or anywhere else, or even what you read, and what is a history which is a traditional history, which we learn from, let's say, reading Mahabharata or reading our different texts, etc. You find our Itihasa tradition actually has a very strong martial tradition, a very strong Digvijaya tradition, right? So in the Mahabharata, Arjun conquers up till the Uttar Kurus, which is in Central Asia, basically. In Raghuvansa, Raghu fights in the Vangshu and goes right up till the Uttara Kuru Ganga, the Tarim Ganga, as we call it. Yashovarman fights the Palasikas. So our Itihasa, right, if you look at it outside the filtered lens of what you call the post-colonial and the colonial narratives, has a very strong martial tradition, right? So I always wanted to research more on this. there is a tradition called Prashasti tradition. The great Sanskrit Prashastis which are there. They also talk a lot about these expeditions, but they are dismissed for a long time as exaggerations or literary productions, not historical productions, which is not true, right? It is very surprising that you can accept Alexander's Greek accounts, which are full of fiction. So they say Alexander was the son of Zeus. He found ape men in India. He found Darius, who was a giant. But we accept all that. There's not a single Indian account in Alexander's invasion, but we accept all that. But our Prashasti records, which have very strong archaeological, numismatic, and foreign corroborative evidence, are not accepted as, even the kernel of truth out of them. Yes, we have to filter out the exaggerations, but the kernel of truth is not accepted. Now, this has demoralized to a great extent our modern national, I would say, honor, right? So in this world, right, yes, we are a country of ahimsa, but you cannot survive as a country of ahimsa. Your Kshatriya tradition is also to be accepted. And it is precisely for this that I thought that this book has to be written, because nobody else was writing this book. So there are disparate, disaggregated, fragmented accounts of the Cholas, somebody of Lalita, they were not clear. So an explicit, unambiguous book talking about our military tradition in foreign shows. So telling us that, yes, we are a peaceful civilization, but we also have sufficient capacity and strength historically to intervene where our interests are. That's the reason why the book was.
Hello, Venkatesh.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please tell me.
I'm Advocate Vivek Garg from Ujjain, from the city of Vikramaditya.
Yes.
So here I want to ask you that we came across as from the history point of view that there are the 4 Vikramaditya. Hello.
Yes, tell me.
I'm driving the car right now, so you may see as a problem. One thing I want to ask you that from the Ujjain, in the Ujjain we find out there are the 4 Vikramaditya who ruled over here.
Correct.
There's one Garhwal Samaj from the one was of Parmar, and one was Chandragupta Vikramaditya, who was this great grandfather of this Skandagupta. So, what do you think that who was the Vikramaditya who ruled over the Bulgaria? Because in some text we found that he conquered the Saudi Arabia also, and
Yes.
somewhere he reached up to the. Some people used to say that he's gone up to the Britain also, because there is a one Salisbury city was there, Salisbury, but actually he was a Salishpuri, because there is a one statue of a one devta, or we can say a Greek god, who was carrying a trident, Trishula. So, and there is a one statue of Shivlinga we have found in the Wales. In the Wales we have found the hills of Tara. At the hills of Tara in the island, there is a Shivling. So our tribes were there also. So what do you think that we have conquered at that time or not?
Sure. Firstly, thanks for your views actually. So on this whole question of Vikramadyas, right, I have dwelt both in my second and my third book. So what I feel is all the 4 Vikramadyas, the conquests have been combined. So if you look at Katha Sarita Sagara, if you look at Vikram Charita, so I have quoted a Vikram Charita. So there is one of Vikramaditya's conquest in the north, Khotan, etc. There's one of Vikramaditya's conquest in the west. You talked about that, right? So there are all 4 Vikramadyas, a combination of them, okay, is what we talk about generally. So see, when in our Itihasa, you have to understand, when there's a great Chakravarti, we don't distinguish between Chakravarti's merits. It is a combination of our Chakravartis which establish a Digvijay tradition. So, in fact, even Skandagupta, we talk about Skandagupta. Skandagupta was also Vikramaditya. If you look at his coins, Shri Vikrama, Parahitkari Vikrama. So, there's a very interesting Sanskrit shloka which says, Shitama Vijayati, Sut Charitrair, Divyam Jayati Vikramaditya. Who is a Vikramaditya? Whom do you call a Vikramaditya? A person जिसने क्षितिज is earth, उसे विजय कर किया अपने तलवार के बल पे, but who spread सुचरित्र through the moral resurgence across the world, he conquered the heavens, Divyam Jayati. That person is a Vikramaditya. So just to answer your question, all the legend, or whatever we call, of Vikramaditya is nothing but a collection of the different achievements of all the Vikramadityas. It may be 4, maybe many more, but it's a collection of them. It's there in both my books. Thank you. Thanks for your views on this.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you.
This
I
is Mohan Jain
want to
again.
know that what is the
Hello.
YouTube link? I want.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you share the
yeah.
YouTube link?
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, I'll share the YouTube link later. Yeah, I think someone is trying to ask a question.
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Mohan Jain from Chicago.
Okay.
Just want to ask a question about that. Are you familiar with the historical Atlas of South Asian Civilization, published by University of Chicago in 1978, and now being updated by Oxford?
Okay.
Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, that shows about 8,000 years of historical facts and artifacts and all that. So you should, I don't know if it is available in India or not, but I have a copy I bought in 82, and I knew that one of the authors, Professor Shiva Bajpai, was here in Chicago. So if not, then please look into it. You will find a lot of interesting things in that. Historical Atlas of South Asian Civilization. University of Chicago has a big department on South Asian studies, and they published it. And it was about 15 years of research, starting with the stuff missionaries got at the University of Minnesota. It was started in 1964, and finally they finished in University of Chicago in 1978. It's a very pictorial and has a lot of artifacts which they have got in there. 2 Indian professors worked on it, along with an American professor. And so it will be interesting to look at. People who are interested in it, history of South Asia, basically India, Greater India. So other thing which I want to ask you, because I come from Rajasthan, Udaipur area, you mentioned Bappa Rawal in your thing. He was the founder of Mewar dynasty, which still continues after 1500 years almost of founding. And the Chittorgarh fort and all these things were part of that. Kumbhalgarh fort or part of that dynasty, they built it, great forts and all that. So you have any more details about what Bappa Rawal did it?
Sure. Yes. So firstly, thanks for your input earlier. I'll definitely look into that.
Okay.
Secondly, on Bappa Rawal, sir, I think there are full details in my book. So my request to you would be if you can buy my book and read it.
Is it available in the US? Not yet.
It is. So if you go to Subbu Publications, they have a US distributor. So you can order it there and it'll come.
Okay.
But there are full details. I mean, Khurasan, the Naushera Pashtun traditions, corroborated evidence from Prakrit records. In fact, there are some, the Delwara royal annals talk about his conquests also in other parts of West Asia. So there are full details. I mean, you will find all that in, there are traditions in Iraq, they say Iran, there are different traditions. You'll find that in my book.
Yeah, they have a lot of information that Chittorgarh fort.
Yeah, exactly.
The dynasty with all the different kings who ruled out there, So, all right, thank you very much. And I just want to say that, you should look into that historical atlas. So they start
100%.
from the Stone Age, they've started, and then start exploring further down the road, Up to 75 they did in the initial publication, but Oxford is now updating it every few years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Right.
We have a question in chat asked by Tulsi Tawari. Have you come across literature on Celtic people prior to 3rd century in Europe?
Okay, so in this particular book, I have focused on very clearly military operations from Indian empires, right? There is an entire research area on Indian civilization spreading to other ancient cultures. It may be the Norse, it may be the Celts, it may be the let's say Native Americans, etc. That is not the research I have done in this book, right? But if you ask me personally, there are a lot of similarities among a lot of ancient people across the world. Okay, so among the Celts, you have the Druids, right? Who have, if you look at certain literature, especially of early England, right, during the time the pre-Saxon invasion, just during the time of the Saxon invasion, etc., you find a lot of references even of warfare of the Celts, etc. So you do find a lot of similarities you have with a lot of the Indic traditions also, right? But I haven't researched on that. That is a different realm altogether. That is basically about ancient Indic civilization and its impact across the world. But yes, it's a phenomenal area of research.
So one question that I have is that a lot of these conquests are naval conquests, in a sense we use the sea route. Now I know that Shivaji built a great navy. Kanoji Angre was a great naval admiral. In fact, in the Pirates of Caribbean's movies, the British call them pirates, but one of the pirate lords is actually Sambhaji Angre, who is actually son of Kanoji Angre. So that's kind of known to me, but I wonder at what point did we fall behind in terms of like naval supremacy, and what were the causes for it? And suddenly we hear a lot about Europeans, reaching to new continents and so on. But Indian Navy seems to be kind of on a decline at some point in time. And do you know like what are the causes of this?
So firstly, basically out of the 21 expeditions, 10 are explicitly naval. One is an amphibious, and the remaining 10 are land-based expeditions, right? So there's a mix of naval and land-based expeditions. Regarding Navy, see, from the right from the late 5th, 6th century onwards, there was a competition between the Persians and Indians in the Aparanta Samudra, or the Western Indian Ocean. After the rise of the Arabs, okay, this contest intensified. In fact, two of the expeditions, Chalukyas and Pratiharas, were really based on establishing or securing Indian, both Indian, I would say, our commercial interest, as also for the tactical reasons. Now, around the 11th, 12th centuries, right, and especially when India started facing a lot of these invasions, that was a period when the entire, I would say, structure, the entire posture of the military posture turned to defensive for the Indian kingdom. And that is but obvious, right? Because it was a big shock, a big shock in terms of huge civilian casualties. In fact, some people call it the world's largest genocide, and I personally would agree with that. Huge amount of temples being destroyed. So the entire military posture had turned defensive. Now, at that point of time, two things happened. Number one, when your culture and civilization is under threat, right, you want your demography to be maintained. So what my view is basically that an opinion built up among a large section of society that you cannot have people, going out to faraway lands, because then your demography or your the population of your people itself decreases out of a certain place. Secondly, we also find with the loss of political power, a huge amount of Indo-Islamic trading networks established all across the coastline. Now, these Indo-Islamic trading networks actually facilitated the Arabic dominance over the western part of our oceans, and slowly even the eastern part of the oceans, right? So the entire trade route between the West Asia and right up to China. Now, in fact, a lot of these, we talk about resistance of the Punjabi Maraccas, right? But let's not forget the Maraccas were pro-Arab, and the fight with the Portuguese was actually for the to establish the Arabic dominance. So two things: loss of political power. Secondly, a society which had to go on the preservation mode, right? So you have to maintain your demography. Lands which were given to the temples. Okay, because a lot of our earlier land grants were secured by the temple deity, right? These temples were under threat. Land was being forcibly occupied. So you needed people, able-bodied people, to actually stay back, defend your claims, land to be continuously occupied and maintained. So obviously you cannot look outward towards that. And that is why a lot of, I would say, emphasis was put on certain classes of people maintaining and staying up. So both these factors led to us losing the dominance over our oceans or our seas. That is why Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is so important. Then in Kalyan, in 1657, he laid the first, keel of the ship. There was great resistance. So in 1498, the Portuguese came to, through via the Cape of Good Hope, came to India basically, and there was a huge papal push. So there were a lot of these papal edicts, which gave the entire eastern seas to the Portuguese, and that's why the Carta system came about. Right? They said we own the sea because God has willed it to us. So there's a huge religious angle to this. Now, when that happened, later the English also came. So Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, when he tried to build the first keel in Kalyan, there was a lot of opposition. The Portuguese sent covert operators to burn those ships. So despite all that, he engaged a lot of the coastal communities, okay, which had not lost those maritime traditions, in order to rebuild this navy. And finally, as my book also tells, in 1663, an Indian naval expedition under the flag, the Indian flag, the Bhagwa flag, was launched from Jaitapur right up till Mocha, unopposed. So it didn't pay any kartas, it didn't pay any permission. This was a time even when the Mughal Empire had to pay kartas to the Portuguese to go to Hajj. So the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj revitalized an ancient dead tradition through this naval expedition. So yes, I mean, to answer your question in short, loss of political power, social threat led to our loss of our naval influence. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj revived it. And it's very important for us to realize today also why political power is very important. Many people think that it's okay to have culture, it's okay not to get into politics, etc. Let's not forget, loss of political power is the biggest, I would say, threat to any cultural civilizations. The Sasanians were wiped out in a matter of decades. The entire Persian civilization was wiped out in a matter of decades because they quickly lost political power. So I think that is the moral of the story which really comes to us.
Yeah, thanks for the detailed answer. I think we had one hand up from Varenya. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I just wanted to ask you, since you mentioned that you researched a lot about it, and I know you mentioned different texts in different languages as well. So I just wanted to know how difficult it was for you to actually source those materials, and whether you had to look for like translated works from like maybe Chinese sources, or you ended up having to learn aspects of the language to adequately complete your research.
Thanks, great question. So I generally refer to translated sources, or I used help of certain translators to use it. So yes, I mean, if you ask me, it was it is actually years of. So if you look at it, the first one of the chapters here, right? There's the first idea of this. I had presented a paper over, I would say, nearly 20 years back in a college seminar, and post that, here and now, I've always been researching on this topic because I was very interested on this topic. So it is a lot of years of different kind of research that's gone into it. Thanks, great question.
Thank you.
I think we'll take one last question from the chat. This is from Tanya. I have just purchased your book, The First Republic. Do you have any references that we can read as well that tells us more about our own governance and state systems? So this is actually about your first book.
Okay. So there are a lot of references. See, if you want to go to actual sources, I think Kautilya's Arthashastra is there. Niti Shastra is there. There are you can actually read the history and culture volumes by Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. So that, in a very concise and a very nice fashion, gives you different kind of details: the administrative organization, the military organization, the actual political history, the cultural spread, etc. So I think it has about 12 volumes. I would say that will be a very nice buy if you're really interested to get into all these areas, whether it be governance, whether it be administration, whether it be culture, etc. But there are many other sources. There are multiple other sources. For First Republic, I had to rely on primary sources. There are about 800 different letters called daftars, letters, accounts called daftars, bakhars, etc. So yeah, I mean, so there are multiple sources, but you could start with the history and history of the culture of the Indian people, like the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan volumes.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Venkatesh ji. I think with this, I think we can call this event over. Just a plug, we have a Substack, indic.substack.com, where we share all the event details and also event recordings. So if you just add your email to that, you'll be notified for all our future events. Please buy authors' books. It's a great way to support authors. We would also love to take the author on a US tour so that we can meet them in person and ask questions directly. And have like talks arranged in different cities. So towards that, feel free to donate to us. It's a tax-free organization. A tax-free receipt will also be given to you. The details for donations are on our Substack posts. So please feel free to donate. And with that, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for everyone.
Thank you, Akshat ji, and thank you, Rajiv ji, and thanks for this event. Thanks to all the guests.
Can I make a comment, sir? Just
Sure.
one thing. You
Yes.
know Rajiv ji in the US? Rajiv,
Yes, definitely.
I've done a lot of